The trillion-dollar economy vision represents an effort by the government of Tamil Nadu to realize Thiruvulluvar's vision of a prosperous state. We extend a hearty welcome to the distinguished members of the Economic Advisory Council, senior officers, industry leaders, entrepreneurs, media representatives, and the other esteemed guests to this thought leadership session on the big bets for Tamil Nadu's $1 trillion economy. Please join me in welcoming Thiru Udaychandran, IAS, Principal Secretary Finance, Government of Tamil Nadu, to deliver the keynote address.
Very good afternoon to everyone. Dr. Raghuram Rajan, Dr. Arvind Subramanian, both esteemed members of the Economic Advisory Council of Honorable CM, and leaders from diverse sectors of industry, media representatives, officials, experts, friends and colleagues. Welcome to this first session of the Tamil Nadu Global Investor Meet 2024. It gives me immense pleasure and privilege to host this highly awaited event where two great minds of our time would interact and express their views on the potential of Tamil Nadu's economy. The Honorable Chief Minister of Tamil Nadu gave this grand vision to our state to become $1 trillion economy by 2030. Under his able guidance, preparation of a strategic plan was set in motion. The Tamil Nadu Infrastructure Development Board under the Finance Department has engaged the Boston Consultancy Group for preparation of the roadmap to be followed by the state. A summary document of the plan has been just released in the inaugural session by Honorable CM, and I hope that the learned members of this august gathering would explore it further. Being the pioneer in shaping various landmark social welfare schemes in the country, Tamil Nadu has also set an example to the country in facilitating robust model of economic growth. The state is investing heavily in infrastructure sector, be it highways or ports, airports, green and renewable energy, or industrial water use, with a specific focus to ensure the growth of the economy is on right track. The government is committed to making Tamil Nadu as the ideal destination for businesses to arrive and creating more and more opportunities for the new industrial jobs. The massive improvement in Tamil Nadu's position in ease of doing business in the recent past is a testimony to this commitment. An economic powerhouse, Tamil Nadu has a solid industrial base with the robust MSME sector, a diverse industrial canvas with more than 130 Fortune 500 companies operating out of the state. A strong presence of IT majors and a stable growth in primary sector is to be noted. Tamil Nadu also prides itself in having one of the most skilled workforce in the country with substantial participation of women. Building on its strength, we are confident that Tamil Nadu is well positioned to achieve the $1 trillion economy and its vision. Preparation of this strategic report is only the first step towards the goal. We realize that the government will form suitably the sector-specific action groups to consider this report, assess the feasibility and the impact potential of the recommendation, and chart a detailed course of action. With the guidance of the Economic Advisory Council and with the stalwarts like our esteemed guest, guided by their expert policy advice, we will take appropriate action to take it forward. Sector-specific policy actions will be identified to push growth in each sector of the economy. Every major verticals, including automobile, electric vehicles, electronics, metals, chemicals, machinery, textiles, footwear, in specifically the technical textiles and non-leather footwear specifically. Among the manufacturing, the service sector will be a major growth driver in the near future, while IT and GCC will figure prominently in the strategy. Growth potential in areas such as tourism, animation and visual effects, financial services and trade, among others, will also be explored in a major way. The dream growth story would be written together by the government and the private sector. The government would play a more proactive role in strengthening key enablers such as robust infrastructure investments, catering to the needs of the growing economy, with a special focus on logistics, power, water, etc. A major push to upskill the workforce needed for the economy of coming age. Facilitation of credit availability will be the major focus, especially to the MSME sector, creation of a vibrant ecosystem for R&D, promotion of innovation through startups from the state. With deft handling of state finances, balancing revenue resources with expenditure requirements, the government is committed to creating enough fiscal space to facilitate this ambitious endeavor. Yes, it's the vision of the Honorable Chief Minister, the commitment of our government, and aspirations of 72 million people of Tamil Nadu. Welcome to the journey. Thank you.
Thank you, sir, for sharing your guidance on Tamil Nadu's vision as well as its pathway towards realizing this. Next, we have Mr. Rahul Jain, Managing Director and Senior Partner, India Head of BCG, who will share with us his insights on the growth opportunity for Tamil Nadu and the key enablers as Tamil Nadu walks its path towards its vision.
Good afternoon, everyone. I think a lot has been already said, so I'll try to maybe elaborate on a few specific aspects and both paints a slightly bigger picture, but then also zero in on some micro details which will be critical for us as we move forward. Yeah. So I think let's start before we zoom into Tamil Nadu at a country level first. I think as you can see, and as has been talked by many people, this is going to be our decade. It is very well talked about in terms of what our country is witnessing right now. And if you look at it from both consumption and investment point of view, this is a unparalleled time for us. If you see any consumption metric in terms of both how the different industries are shaping, how the demographic dividend is playing out, you see industry after industry, India being a market leader in terms of growth that the consumption sector is providing. Whether it is just to illustrate, I mean, you take auto industry, the two-wheeler market, growing at 7%, it's the number one growing market in the world. Look at the aviation industry, we are again growing at 11%, is the number 3 in the world. And a lot of that is driven by our massive demographic dividend, which is again very well known. But just to contrast, on an average, our working population and our age is 10 years lesser than China. Many parts of the world, we are 20 years lesser. And it's a huge privilege and advantage for us in times to come. Also, what it does is the growing and the working population is very sizably based in India. And therefore, as we think of scripting our manufacturing future, that will play a very critical role. I think the other very important aspect is the infrastructure that has been built, not just physical, which we all talk about, but also digital, whether it is UPI, whether it is ONDC, and all the plethora of different things that have been rolled out, which is worldwide seen as an example of what we stand for. Right? So that's the macro picture of India. Next slide. If we look at what it therefore, as we zoom into different states, I think Chennai and Tamil Nadu has been a shining beacon in this. I think as we have learned in the inauguration session, we have really leapfrogged over the last few years, both from an investment appetite and in the way the world perceives it. Right? I think if you look at our own economy, right, it's the second largest economy in the country, as you know, in terms of GDP. But if Tamil Nadu was a country, it will be the 50th largest GDP in the world, and that will be comparable to Finland and almost 60% of Singapore. That is Tamil Nadu itself. It is actually the most industrialized state in India, with more than 45,000 registered factories and 15% of all operational factories within the country in Tamil Nadu. And also a very intriguing factor is this is actually a very regionally inclusive state. If you look at many of our peer states, a lot of the economic activity is focused on very few districts. But in Tamil Nadu, we have 25% plus districts which contribute to half of our GDP. It is a far more spread out economic development than any other state which is comparable to us. If you look at even the growth of the state, it will stand out in compared to others. We are, I think, fifth largest, fastest growing state, and just the delta GDP that we add every year in this state is by itself the size of several countries in the world. So I think it cannot be ignored in its size and its growth. Our per capita consumption is also amongst the top 3 in the country. So it's a very strong starting point. But as has been laid out, we want to take it to the next level. We want to reach the trillion-dollar economy, and therefore, I think 2 factors which we wanted to highlight very differently, which are underlying strengths of the state. One is a very strong skilled workforce. If you look at the percentage workforce that is skilled, it is step change higher than any other state in the country. It is, if you look at the GER, which is a higher ed percentage, in Tamil Nadu, it is 47% compared to 27% in the rest of the state. If you look at the labor force ratio, it is 65% compared to 58%. As I was saying, even within this, if you look at the share of the skilled labor, and if you look at the share of the supervisory labor, it is substantially higher than the rest of the country. Right? Also, it is socially inclusive, and this goes back to our rich tradition, Dravidian revolution. I think the percentage women both in the higher ed and the labor force is again substantially higher than the rest of the country, right? And these are very strong underlying factors which help us in times to come. Next slide, please. I think as we chart out the course, right, for us as a state, there were 5 factors which we felt were very critical. Right? One is the entire impetus on services. If you look at the share of services in the state, it's been traditionally a bit lower than the rest of the peer states. And that could be a huge opportunity for us in really charting that out. In the way the roadmap has been laid out, services play a massive role in taking the state forward in our vision towards the trillion-dollar economy. And for that, our workforce, our consumption, our population, all will be a pretty critical role. And that, if you zoom in further, comes down to creating lots of global capability centers, innovation hubs, attracting tourism, and really focusing on IT in tier 1, tier 2 cities. If all of these were to leapfrog, services will naturally follow, and that could be a very big driver of growth for the state. The second big piece which has been envisioned is really actually value adding and moving in each industry from basic to advanced. Now, whether it is moving to technical textiles, whether it is moving to, within agriculture to most post-harvest processing, whether it is moving from mobile phone manufacturing assembly to actually going down to sub-components and actual ingredients of that, whether it is going to cell manufacturing. So we have to move from one level to the second level within the value chain, which creates higher employment and economic growth. The third big piece is around exports. If you look at it, we are already quite well positioned on that, but there are several categories like electronics, auto components, textiles, ER&D, footwear, leather, where we have a natural advantage and we could play a pretty significant role. And here, I think the global macroeconomic view where the world is trying to diversify from China, looking for a clear second option in India plays a big role, and Tamil Nadu is really well positioned to play a big role in this. I think the fourth thing we wanted to talk about is actually taking scale and creating real advantage in a few sectors. Now, we are very well known for auto and EV. We are known for textile, capital goods, electronics. How could we really focus on them to create a big scale advantage and establish global competitiveness? Because in the long run, that will be the most critical. And last but not the least, there are a slew of global mega trends, whether it is green energy, specialty chemical, and we have located these, and these are part of the roadmap on how do we capture them specifically as a part of our journey. So these were some of the building blocks which led to thinking about the future, economic growth acceleration. Next slide, please. We have envisioned a roadmap for different elements, whether it is road corridor, whether it is city master plans, whether it is air cargo handling and sea cargo handling facility. Each of these are very critical to take the state's physical, already strong infrastructure to the next level, to provide the next impetus of growth. Next slide, please. I think similarly, equally important is R&D and innovation. Whether it is attracting unicorns and the startup ecosystem, or it is creating private-led R&D and facilitating global companies and Indian companies to establish the R&D centers in India, or it is actually creating, we already have very strong academia. How do we connect the academia better with the industry to create greater collaboration, and how insights which remain in educational labs convert to business reality is again an important point. So between these three, R&D and innovation could be another big enabler for us to achieve our vision. Next slide, please. I think the third piece is human capital. I think we will need to make a step change on this. As we know, we rely a lot on actually imported labor as well from other states. I think as we think of both skilled value addition and the amount of work that happens, we will need to really upskill lots of current workforce from whatever skill level they are to the next level. Similarly, we'll need to include and integrate 60 lakh additional women into the workforce. And likewise, we will need to really ensure health and well-being of our workforce. So that's on the human capital side. Next slide, please. And last and not the least, I think equally important is strategic investments, which is sector-specific policies which are well worked through and facilitate investment. A very strong ecosystem orchestration, especially as you create hubs and you attract investment in creating common facilities, skilling, etc. And largely, a very strong institutional structure for government to business services, single window, and a lot has been done there. But really, how do you facilitate investment and collaboration, which is seamless and people find it more easy to work? As we talk to global companies, they still feel, while we have moved a lot as a country and as a state, there are still few yards to move on them to become really world standard. So between these four enablers, we believe we have all the raw elements there, and as we work with them, we will achieve our vision of $1 trillion economy. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Jain, for this presentation. May I invite Dr. S.K. Prabhakar, IAS, MD of Tamil Nadu Road Development Company, to present the memento to Mr. Jain. We now move on to the fireside discussion that we have all been eagerly waiting for on the big bets for Tamil Nadu's $1 trillion economy. The discussion will be moderated by Ms. Menika Doshi, Senior Editor, Bloomberg. The distinguished guests for this session require little by way of introduction. I welcome on stage Dr. Raghuram Rajan, former Governor of RBI, Professor of Finance at the University of Chicago Booth School of Business, Dr. Arvind Subramanian, former Chief Economic Advisor, Senior Fellow at the Peterson Institute. Both of them are members of the Chief Minister's Economic Advisory Council. Given the relevance of deep economic thinking to this $1 trillion vision, this promises to be a very engaging and insightful conversation.
Thank you very much for being here this morning, and what a show Tamil Nadu has put on this morning. Thank you to both our guests in this panel discussion. All morning, I think a variety of people have tried to sell Tamil Nadu to you. I'm a journalist, so I'm going to try and probe that narrative a little bit through the course of the next 45 minutes and try and understand what Tamil Nadu needs to do to deliver that $1 trillion hairy, audacious goal, as the union minister called it. Now, I'm taking the liberty to interpret big bets as things that Tamil Nadu should do, things that the state needs to improve on or fix, and things that it probably should not do. And I'm going to try and give you an overview of all of that through the minds, as introduced, of two thought leaders on the panel here. So let's start with you, Dr. Rajan, first. $1 trillion, doable?
Can you hear me?
Mine is very loud, yes.
I think the gods are conspiring against Raghu here, so it should be okay. Let me start with is it doable?
Doable.
Okay,
that's the question to both of you.
Doable. So if you take this literally, the 1 trillion. As Piyush Goyal said, that means basically 18% growth over the next 7-8 years. Now, in the history of humanity, no country at no point in time has done 18% growth ever. Okay, for example, China did 10, 11% growth over 40 years, but never 18% over a 7-8 year horizon. So it is ambitious, but let me answer it by saying, if there is any state in India that could do it, it's probably Tamil Nadu.
Good save.
And second, very important, if there's any point in history where I think this could be done, I would say it's now. So if you permit me, I'll elaborate on both of these. Okay.
If Dr. Rajan's mic is working, let me get the first
Yeah,
word
yeah,
from
yeah,
him,
okay.
and then I'll come back to both of you to elaborate on
Sure.
why you think it's,
Look, I agree entirely with what Arvind just said, that this is a very, very ambitious goal, but this is a good time for Tamil Nadu to set an ambitious goal and to try and reach it. And of course, what's important is not so much the goal as the kinds of forces that it propels within the state. When you set such a goal, then it focuses everybody's mind into doing the things that are needed to achieve that. And as a result, you get the kind of action that certainly Tamil Nadu can benefit tremendously from today, but more generally, India can benefit from. So I think that that sort of adds to what Arvind just said.
Okay, I'll pass it back to you then. You wanted to elaborate on what you think the push factors.
When I mean by why Tamil Nadu and why this point in time,
Right.
let's start with this point in time. And just to make it a little bit personal and a little bit, is that Raghu and I actually wrote a paper on India, I don't know, about 15 years ago, basically saying what an unusual model of development India was, because unlike any other country in history, all countries that had done well had done by doing a lot of manufacturing. You go from agriculture to manufacturing and services, and India was very unusual because it kind of skipped the manufacturing stage or didn't do enough compared to all these other countries and went straight to services. Now, the interesting thing is that Raghu has now doubled down on that point and says, the future of India is services. I have actually, I'm going to tell you, I'm beginning to rethink the research that Raghu and I did at this point in time. See, because what is happening, with the decline of China is that a huge opportunity is opening up. Huge. I mean, just to give you a sense of scale, if you take labor-intensive goods in the economy, which is, clothing, footwear, leather, textiles, toys, etc., China's share of global exports is something like 40%. Guess what India's share is? 4%. Okay? If, therefore, China goes from 40, as it inevitably is going to 35, 30, 25, and if India can take advantage of that opportunity, you are actually talking about reversing some of the manufacturing that India has not taken advantage of. So that's a big opportunity. So that's the China opportunity. Why Tamil Nadu? You see, I have been actually very impressed in the last 6 months by some of the things that have been happening in Tamil Nadu. Of course, a lot of investments are coming in, but actually, for me, the most unique thing that's happening, which has made me sit up and kind of revise my priors, is that we always said India could never be a big exporting powerhouse because it could not operate factories at scale. 30,000, Foxconn, for example, it employs 150, 200,000 people. And India, if you looked at India, 500, the big ones would be 2,000, 2,500. But now, some of the factories that are being set up in Tamil Nadu are actually 20, 30,000 size factories, which is unprecedented. So if you, and I'm going to stop now, so if you combine that opportunity with what Tamil Nadu itself is doing in terms of beginning to operate at scale, the prospect of actually going from 4% of global exports, India will never go to 25, but 4% to 12%, 15%, that's a huge amount. Because remember, we're talking about 4% of something like 10, 15 trillion dollars, and you can really, and that's the sense in which this kind of goal that Tamil Nadu has set for itself, probably a bit ambitious, but I think definitely something that it can aspire to.
Goals should be ambitious.
Yeah.
So good about that. Dr. Rajan, you've been arguing through your book that you co-authored with Rohit Lamba, against, I won't say against, but that a policy tilt towards manufacturing subsidies or incentives, especially low value add manufacturing, the kind of assembly work that India is currently doing, is not the best solution to our problems. But Tamil Nadu runs counter to that, right? Because most of those phone factories are here. They're generating employment for women.
Right. So let me be very clear about what I'm saying.
Sure, please.
I'm saying don't over-subsidize manufacturing and think that's the only path to growth. And what we heard from the presentation so far have been, look, services is also a big part of the growth story. And let's not treat services as a stepchild, less valuable, less amenable to low-skilled jobs. Think about tourism in this state. How many jobs can be created through the tourism industry? That's what we heard in the presentation. So many opportunities to create low and semi-skilled jobs through that avenue. So that's important to remember. On Arvind's point, I'm a little more skeptical that we're going to see a whole lot of jobs, fleeing China in the non-strategic areas. Okay. All the textiles, this, that, etc. They'll move over time, but they're not strategic. And to that extent, the barriers to exporting from China are going to be much more limited than, for example, in some of the more strategic areas where barriers are emerging. China still has a lot of people to be employed. So it's still an attractive place. I was talking to some business people here. So we are competing. And Tamil Nadu is a very strong competitor. But we are competing with other emerging markets for that kind of low-skill business. Where we have an advantage in manufacturing is higher value-added manufacturing. And that's where all the industries of the future are coming. And so I'm very much for using the skills of the state, the tremendous number of engineers, for example, the fact that our GER ratio, number of people in higher education at any point in time, it's north of Europe at this point in Tamil Nadu. It's 27% in the United Kingdom. We have the capability of moving higher than that low-skilled manufacturing. By all means, don't discourage it, but be more ambitious on focusing on the higher end. On, when you're making, metals, focus on specialized metals, because we have the engineering talent to do that kind of thing. So again, bottom line, don't ignore the fact that we can do a lot of low-skill manufacturing. If that comes to our shores, great, and that will come. But if you want to be ambitious, focus on the higher end. And there's a lot of higher end stuff that can be done given the quality of the education, given the growing quality of the infrastructure, given the government support with this ambitious target. And that's what I would also not ignore.
Okay. Dr. Rajan, I do want to say that I think this is a nuanced sort of shift away from the broad way your book has been interpreted. But I'll leave that aside for now. Can we get to the high value parts of this manufacturing chain without doing the low value parts, which Tamil Nadu is benefiting from right now through the assembly lines? What kind of high value bits are you talking about that would meet this requirement of big bets?
Well, so this goes back to, this is completely consistent with what I've been talking about, that higher value added, higher value added in manufacturing services are coming together. We saw earlier in the presentation today, Qualcomm is thinking of setting up design factories here. That's design operations here. That's an important aspect of chip manufacturing, the chip design that goes in. In fact, Qualcomm doesn't make any chips. It's all made in Taiwan, but Qualcomm does the design. Manufacturing and services are coming together in a really, really interesting way. Take electric vehicles, 40 million lines of code written for Tesla. That's a big part of Tesla's value, right? So manufacturing services coming together, Tamil Nadu has the benefit of being able to do both. That's great. Your question, do you have to go to the low end in order to do the high end? No evidence that you need to do that.
Okay.
Take Apple. Apple hasn't manufactured a product since 2004.
Sure, but how do you generate the jobs then, Dr. Rajan? Which you need at every part of the value chain.
I would say
right?
you can, that's the
Yeah.
point. Generate jobs wherever you can. Assembly jobs are going to be an important factor because we have the capability, we have the workforce that can do those jobs. Those women we talked about,
Right.
important part of assembly in many countries, including in Tamil Nadu. So do it where you can. Second, we've got the opportunity to go higher end with the engineering talent we have, with the fact that, we talked about GCCs coming to Tamil Nadu. Tamil Nadu has 10% of the GCCs in India, which is 40% of the GCCs in the world. These are global capability centers. That's another example of where Tamil Nadu has an advantage. So don't necessarily just focus on the lower end and say, I need just those jobs. You can generate those jobs, but you can also generate those jobs outside of manufacturing, for example, the tourism part that we talked about. But also, the higher end is where the value added truly is. That's where we're talking about innovation. That's where we're talking about creativity. One example, in Chennai, IIT Chennai, we have a gentleman who's trying to set rockets into space. This is a firm called Agnikul. They've got a bunch of young people coming together to design the rocket. They're taking the help of ISRO. They've started some early early phase launches. But what is important really is, this is a product which is entirely manufactured by 3D printing. There is no assembly line. It's done by 3D printers. So what this suggests is there are lots of options in Tamil Nadu. You don't just have to go to the low-skilled assembly. That is one option, but there's a lot of other options.
I think we should make this a conversation about Raghu and me talking about manufacturing and services. We should talk about Tamil Nadu, what Tamil Nadu can do.
But that applies to Tamil Nadu and the model that it picks to grow from here on, right?
The basic problem with focusing on the high end is we forget the statistic that high end IT, whatever you want to add to that, is probably 2% of the workforce, 3% of the workforce, 4% of the workforce. But as Menaka was saying, if you want to really get 15, 20, 30% of the workforce, you have no choice but to get these low-skilled jobs. And the point that China will not vacate in these industries and will only vacate in strategic industries, Raghu, is not quite true, because remember that on top of what is happening in China, capital fleeing, there's a kind of organic part where China is just becoming uncompetitive in these things.
Not yet.
Just to give you one statistic, in between 2008 and
look at the numbers for Chinese exports. There is no evidence that Chinese exports are falling off in any of these sectors. Just look at it.
I've looked at for example, clothing. China's global export shares come down by about 7 percentage points in the last 7 years, actually.
That's a slow pace of decline.
7% of a 20 trillion market is quite big. But coming back to I think the manufacturing versus service thing. See, Menaka asked a question about whether you need to do low end to do high end. Maybe you do, maybe you don't. But I think, Raghu, you've forgotten a piece that you and I wrote a long time ago, but doing too much of services can actually make manufacturing more difficult because, you compete away some skills. The factories need designers, the factories need managers, and the more you do services, the more the exchange rate becomes uncompetitive.
Arvind, you don't see the fact they're so closely interlinked today. You don't talk about these as two separate things. Services and manufacturing are so closely linked. When you're talking about the designers for the factories, that's what I call services. It's embedded in manufacturing, and it's happening across the world. And what I'm saying is Tamil Nadu has the possibility of moving to this new form of manufacturing, which involves both the actual production, but also the design, the intellectual property that goes into it, because it does both. And that's the beauty of siting in Tamil Nadu today.
Yeah, but coming back to, I think some of the, yeah, go ahead.
Quick short counter, and then I want to ask the, sort of the next
No,
angle to
I
this.
think let's move on
Okay,
to the, yeah.
because I think, look, I'll call ceasefire on this debate for a moment and, say we can discuss this outside, but India needs to get its hand on every kind of work that it can, whether it's goods or services.
I have a phrase for this.
Yeah.
Mao Zedong used to say, should you do agriculture or manufacturing?
What Tamil Nadu can do right now is because it benefits from a tremendous amount of migrant labor from those northern states, it can do both. Eventually, when those states get their act together, I mean, we've seen every state trying to bring more investment in. When that happens, you may have to then morph into the higher valued added aspects which you have built a base in. But for now, I think it can do both.
But to do that, you have to start the work now.
Absolutely.
The skilling, the education, the training.
So I think we should shift a little bit gear, getting away from this manufacturing. So the question is, what are the other things that Tamil Nadu
The big bets, the low-hanging fruit is gone.
I think in big bets is in terms of, sectors or whatever, but there's some preconditions which will make those big bets come. And that's where I think Tamil Nadu has a lot going, but also some challenges which I think need to be addressed.
Sure.
Yep. I think the first, people have spoken about the talent, etc. Tamil Nadu has. Of course, my favorite statistic is that out of 84 chess grandmasters in India, 30 are from Tamil Nadu. So that gives you a sense of what the talent pool is. See, I think the second point I would say is a slightly controversial point to make at this juncture, which I think Tamil Nadu has going for it, but which it should continue and maintain and not give up on that, which is that, one things that investors look for a lot is social peace and social stability. Mm-hmm. Now, the problem with having majoritarian politics is that, you can have stability for some time, but if you aggravate the divides in society, in the long run, you don't know what can blow up, and investors will kind of charge a premium for that. Tamil Nadu, because I think all the identity battles are somewhat in the past, and generally governance politics here has, I wouldn't say transcended, but has sort of put behind the politics of identity, the politics of religion. So that long-run stability that Tamil Nadu provides by way of social stability and peace, I think is going to be a real platform for some of these big bets in the future.
Dr. Subramaniam, aren't you painting too rosy a picture?
No, I'm saying...
of course, yes, it might be better than in other states, but it definitely isn't...
But as they always say, it's all relative in this business, right? You don't, when a lion meets two of you, you don't have to run faster than the lion, you just have to run faster than the other person. The last point I think I want to emphasize here also is, this is something that maybe we come to later. I think if you look around India, I think the quality of bureaucratic management and the bureaucratic implementation infrastructure in Tamil Nadu is actually, by Indian standards, even by objective standards, very, very high. I'll just give you my own personal experience here. For the last 1 year, I have, worked very closely with, the top bureaucracy and, all the middle bureaucracy. And what you get a sense of is, a high competence, high level of commitment, and a willingness to kind of learn and translate these things. And remember, all these things, they seem kind of unimportant, but over the long run, this is what investors look for. They want stability, competence, execution, and this is what Tamil Nadu has to offer. Above all, I think coming back to the last point, what is it that Tamil Nadu needs? I do think that, there's a famous Intel saying, only the paranoid survive. Yeah. I think that sense that, and I think that's how I see the $1 trillion bet. It's a kind of commitment to say we have to be on it all the time. So it's not something, and if the political leadership embraces that very seriously, then I think only the paranoid survive can be a recipe for actually taking this thing forward.
Okay, we've spent quite a bit of time through the course of this morning and this panel discussion talking about all the great strengths Tamil Nadu has. Let me try and push back on some of the areas that it needs to improve on, and that brings me to the state of the fisc in the state, so to speak. Public debt. I think last data that I saw that was available on an aggregate basis was over 5 lakh crore rupees. I don't know if that has shifted in the last year or so, but that is, I think, almost a third of GDP, 27% of GDP in the higher end across states, right? Especially for a state as developed and industrialized as Tamil Nadu. So what do you both make of what needs to get fixed there? And the second question, I'll come to you there, is a big portion of state debt possibly is also discom debt or the debts in the power sector. Dr. Rajan first.
Well, I mean, obviously you need to look at every source of revenue to make sure that you're optimizing that, and you have to focus on trying to minimize the unnecessary expenditures. That's the obvious thing when you look at deficits. But the third aspect of trying to get your fisc in order is growth. If you can get sufficient growth, without having to spend for it, if you can attract sufficient investment, sufficient jobs, and therefore sufficient tax revenues, that can also help. I think it'll have to be a mix of all three. Fortunately, the debt situation is not a crisis. It's certainly something to pay attention to, but relative to some of the other states that Arvind and I talked to, it's a much healthier situation.
Isn't that unusual for a state this industrialized and this far ahead in terms of, both state GDP, per capita income,
to have this level of
this level of debt?
Yeah,
yes.
I mean, part of the point, of course, is that social spending in Tamil Nadu has also been higher than other places.
But if you're borrowing and spending,
no, so in that sense, this is investment, if you will, in people rather than investment in things. Okay. And hopefully it pays off in terms of having a higher quality workforce over time, a better educated workforce and so on. But the point has to be taken that we have to look at all these aspects and do what is necessary. Arvind has been, as you know, in charge of a workforce to look at the discom debt and the discom revenues. That's not an unimportant part of the excess spending and how to target that. But I think if you look across in many states, so this is something that, when this government came into power, looking at all the fees that have been, stuck at very low levels, the property taxes that have been stuck at very low levels, how to get them to a reasonable level. You don't want to, raise them excessively, but get them to a reasonable level where they match the kind of services that are being given in return for that.
From a revenue-raising point of view.
Revenue-raising part of it. And of course, on the spending, you have to be careful. Every state has to be careful that you don't overdo it on the social spending. So that's going to be very important. Of course, the discom is part of it.
I think the reason, just to clarify to the audience, the reason I'm bringing up debt is because eventually if you want to invest in all the things you want to build out over the course of the next 20 years, you need money. To raise money, you need a balance sheet that you can raise money on. So that's why. Yeah.
So the question is, does Tamil Nadu have the macroeconomic stability base for all these things that it wants to do?
Sure.
So one, certainly the level of debt is not nowhere near crisis mode, but certainly has to be paid attention to. Now, it turns out that Tamil Nadu's Achilles heel on this is actually the power sector.
It is.
Because 1/3 of all debt is actually discom debt.
Right.
So when we talk about macro, power is macro in Tamil Nadu, and therefore the power sector is a challenge. And so, along with some colleagues, I wrote a report for the government on this. And I think the bad news, of course, is that the debt is very high. Discom losses are very high and have, still unsustainably high. But the good news, I think, is that the Tamil Nadu government is committed to actually getting this back on course, because let's not forget, along with raising property taxes, when this government came to power, it raised property taxes, but it also raised some of the tariffs and actually indexed them to inflation, which was a very kind of progressive policy. So the government has started to take action on that. It is committed to institutional reform, because the power sector problem is not just a tariff problem, it's also an institutional problem, because Tamil Nadu is one of the few states, in fact probably the only one of 3 states in India where generation and distribution are still in the same institutional setup, and every other state has done that, and also many other states have brought in the private sector into distribution as well. So these are some of the reforms that the government is contemplating, and I think there is a clear realization that unless these things are addressed, not only will the macro problem always be under stress, that also there's another dimension to this, which is that if you want to attract renewables into the state, the investment community will, if it looks at the Discom and sees that it's not a very solid balance sheet entity, their incentive to invest in the state will also come down. So for both those reasons, just attracting some of the big bets, because remember, we've not spoken about the big bet of renewables in Tamil Nadu.
Absolutely.
Especially offshore wind is, I think, a real game changer for Tamil Nadu. But in order to do that big bet, they realize that institutional reform is. So I'm going to be, keeping the Tamil Nadu government.
So you're the man in charge, and you're the man to hold accountable.
But,
at least to hold accountable.
Yeah,
What's the timeline for this?
I mean, that the government has to decide, but certainly I think it's very serious about, a time. See, because all these changes, you can't do it overnight, but they've certainly looked at these very seriously, and they're going to, have a time path for implementing some of these reforms. Because it's a matter of macroeconomic, survival. It's also a matter of attracting some of the big bets for Tamil Nadu.
Okay. In the vein of talking about revenue raising, I think 2 other areas that I want to focus on, and I'd like both your views on this. And one is, of course, the devolution of taxes from the center and how critical a role that plays in Tamil Nadu having the money it needs to invest in all the future talents. And secondly, most importantly, FDI. I think the goal to reach 1 trillion seems to be attracting, as the BCG presentation suggested, up to $4 trillion in foreign direct investment. Now, this is an area where Tamil Nadu has done well, but not as well as it scores on most other parameters. I think it ranks maybe 4th or 5th in terms of the state share of overall FDI that India gets. So I'd like both your thoughts on revenue raising from the center, devolution of taxes, and the potential for scaling up FDI.
Well, I think from the center, the issue really is that over time, the center, we've both been at the center, more and more is being raised through cess, which is not shared with the states.
Yes.
And that is a problem. I think, Dr. Reddy's Finance Commission tried to make some statements about that and tried to devolve more to the states. Since then, we've got a pushback, and we've got more towards the center slightly in the 15th Finance Commission. Now we have the 16th Finance Commission. More generally, I think India is too big to be run only from the center. The states are extremely important. We need to devolve more finances to the states. That's also where a lot of the investment is going to take place going forward, including in infrastructure. And so the steady devolution of funds and functions to the states that has happened over time, I think needs to be continued. On the FDI, almost surely we need to attract a much bigger part of the China plus one. That's the strategic aspect, the China plus one, the insurance that companies are taking
Sure.
against the. A lot of those flows are going to Vietnam. A lot of those flows are going to Mexico because of
Nearshoring.
yeah.
Mexico nearshoring. Vietnam
Mexico's
costs.
nearshoring, Vietnam because it's more in the regional trade agreements and so on. That's something that certainly India as a country needs to focus more on. How do we get more of that kind of flow? And that would mean negotiating more of these regional trade agreements, which of course Tamil Nadu will benefit from if we get to be part of that. But I think even within the country, Tamil Nadu has to stand up and say, look, we're the place that you should be in and attract that kind of investment going forward. We heard a bunch of investment pledges made
We
today.
did, yes.
But I think there are so many, not just for exports, but FDI to sort of cater to the domestic market. I mean, think, for example, of green investment in green power generation within the state. If we have the kind of growth path that we aim for, certainly we'll need a lot more power. And that power can be generated through green sources. It doesn't just have to be domestic firms investing. It can also be foreign firms investing for the domestic market. Lots of scope there. We have to create the kind of environment where that kind of sort of investment comes in. There are lots of entities looking to invest today because they're looking for new growth areas. So portraying that picture and offering, back to Arvind's earlier point, a sort of picture of stable policy, that will attract a lot of investment.
Okay.
So
Can
let
I
me say
know-
something controversial on devolution. Okay.
Please do.
So just for the audience, every state gets some amount of revenue from taxes that are collected by the center. And we have this very august body called the Finance Commission that every 5 years says how much should each state get. Now, the fact of the matter is that in this devolution, and I know I've studied this closely, and going to our forthcoming book is going to speak about that. This devolution has a big amount of redistribution in it, going from the richer southern states to the poorer Hindi heartland. Now, that was part of nation building, keeping India together. But over time, when other things go bad, southern states are increasingly saying, why should we, contribute to this redistribution consistently over time? And the big moment is going to be when the Delimitation Commission comes in 2026, when, if, for example, political representation is changed, which gives more relative power to the Hindi heartland relative to the southern states that have slower population growth, that disaffection will grow because the southern states will say, we contribute fiscal much more and we're losing political power. So the wedge between fiscal power and fiscal contribution and political power is going to rise over time. And I think, I don't want to paint too, dire a picture, but over time, I think we need a little bit of a recorrection in the fiscal arrangements so that the southern states, including Tamil Nadu, get to retain a slightly larger portion of resources that are coming from the center. So I think that has to be part of the new social contract going forward.
Okay. Hopefully the Finance Commission will look at it because
Hopefully.
Because this has been a debate that's gone on for quite some time now. But just to look at it from the revenue-raising point of view for the state, right?
So here, go ahead, sorry.
Are there options, Dr. Subramanian?
Yeah, there are. So
if we don't get the ideal situation in terms of devolution, are there options the state ought to be exploring to be able to raise more revenue to invest in the things it needs to?
So in fact, as a matter of fact, the state is considered. So remember, states, their big revenue pools are the stamp duty, liquor policy,
Right.
petroleum, and kind of property taxes as well.
The stuff that stayed out of GST.
That's out of the thing. And here, I think the government is actually, in fact, one of the things I'm advising the state government on is how to augment revenue in relation to stamp duties and property taxes, and also improving administration of the GST. Now, I think one has to be a bit realistic. My sense is that if this is improved sustainably, I think the state would get about 1 percentage point of GSDP, which is not small. If you take Tamil Nadu, for example, that would be something like, I think, 30,000 or 40,000 crores. And that's a huge amount.
Yeah.
And so those are the things which they're actively considering, which in the long run could help state finances as well.
One other source is devolution within the state. If you devolve more functions to the municipalities, there is a possibility that municipality could also raise financing themselves. One thing that India does very little of as a
bonds,
country
yeah.
is local body financing.
Sure.
And there, when you're raising money to fund a local utility or a local road, think, for example, if we go green in a much bigger way, you could have every local municipality having a 2 megawatt, 5 megawatt plant, for example, based on solar or wind, right? That could be financed by private entities financing the local body, because you can have a much better sense of what is coming in, what is going out.
Yeah.
So local body financing, more transparency about that, that's something that India as a whole needs to do. Tamil Nadu could be a forerunner in that kind of.
I think the major local body financing is the two ones. One is user fees, and the other is property taxes. Property taxes are done by urban local bodies, strictly speaking. And there, I think there's scope for increasing that even in Tamil Nadu by about 0.5 percentage point or so. They could do that, and that would contribute to the overall thing. But I think I would be really careful. Raghu, this is one of the lessons I've learned studying Indian economic history is, I think we overdo this decentralization stuff.
We haven't done it yet.
No, because the closer the government is to the people, the more reluctant they are to tax. So this is a kind of political economy lesson I've learned from things. So that's why I get a bit nervous about too much decentralization, because you say if there's a man and he knows that the official there has raised his taxes, that generally contributes to a lot more to. So I think we have to be a bit careful and a bit imaginative here, but resist a little bit this thing that decentralization will give us all this nirvana of accountability, etc., because there's also more capture, more reluctance to tax.
These are arguments which have been made
I'm-
time and again,
Okay,
and we make it time and again without ever trying it.
Okay, but we will definitely put the audience to sleep if we talk about decentralization in more detail at this point in time. I do want to say, though, there is, I think, a municipal corporation in Madhya Pradesh that did do, in fact, a green bond for solar power. So it is happening. It's happening in bits and pieces. I want to come back to why you think Tamil Nadu, or what can Tamil Nadu do to attract that quantum of foreign direct investment. There are investors sitting here, there are investors attending these 2 days of conversations. What should Tamil Nadu be saying to them to get their money?
I think we've kind of touched upon this, quite extensively there and in this conversation as well. I think that if Tamil Nadu can, continue with its, stable politics, build on this, social stability and peace, have stable policies, and continue creating this climate. We saw, for example, it's climbing up the ease of doing business.
Sure.
But also, I think for some of the big bets, like in renewables and things, some institutional strengthening will have to be done. For example, on the power side, for example, have to improve. So I think overall, I think Tamil Nadu seems to be on the trajectory, or creating the base for attracting this foreign direct investment. To some extent, a little bit more incentives here to attract some of the strategic investments it could do. But I think those are just small amounts. The broader thing has to be, continuing the governance, stability, trying to reduce, whatever investors are scared about policies, erratic policies, maybe corruption, all these things which investors care about. I think those are the dimensions along which it could do a little bit more. But generally, from what we saw today, Tamil Nadu does seem to be on the right track.
Let me make it a little bit more specific then to both of you. What can it do to rival Bangalore as a startup center? What can it do to build a thriving AI economy in the state? What can it do to bring the semiconductor Micron plant, which you don't like, from Gujarat to Tamil Nadu?
Not by giving a huge subsidy, not matching Gujarat's subsidy. No,
Sure.
look,
I think
seriously.
I think you can't match Gujarat in any case.
But you get the spirit. You get the
seriously,
spirit of what I'm
seriously,
asking.
you asked about what would attract investors. Again and again, we have to come back to create, focus on the workforce that Tamil Nadu has. Because that's different. It's a capable workforce. It is something that will bring people here. And augment it with for example, the Nan Mudalvan scheme to upskill the workforce so that, again and again, when I was researching my book, when you talk to manufacturers in India more generally, they say, we can't find workers.
That's true.
How can you not find workers in India? We have so many people. Well, what they mean is we don't find workers who are adequately trained. That's where Tamil Nadu is different. And that's where we have to focus on building that strength so that firms will come and invest in India. In Tamil Nadu, on the broader point that, what about the, intellectual property, the startups, the R&D, that environment we have the basics for that environment. We have to do far more.
What? Specifically what?
For example, we need more IITs situated in Tamil Nadu.
Okay.
We have IIT Chennai, we need more NITs, we need more medical institutions. We can't rest on the fact that we already have a lot of good institutions. We have to upgrade them because really the global frontiers is still something which we need to achieve. We need to bring them to incorporate in Chennai. And the way to do that is to examine what are the frictions that they have. Some of it has to do with India-level frictions of bringing in and taking out money. Those have been addressed over time. More will be addressed. But, an earlier friction was patenting. We solved that friction by putting more resources to it. Now Tamil Nadu is one of the places where you have the most patenting in India. So I think we need to address each of these issues. What is inhibiting you? Why will you, and our entrepreneurs will tell us very quickly, why do I choose Singapore over India? Here's why, fix those. And where the state can do its job, we need to do that. And that's why I think I started by saying the ambitious goal is important because it focuses your mind on what needs to be done. And there are a few things that need to be done to make this an easier place to build those firms.
Sure. I do believe some Indian firms are in fact now relocating from Singapore to India.
That's a good thing.
A, because the tax arbitrage has narrowed considerably, and B, they want to list in India.
Exactly.
Far more vibrant market today than Singapore or anywhere else in the world is.
And what we have to do is make it easier.
That reverse flow is happening at a very slow pace, but happening.
Yeah.
So I think on manufacturing,
semiconductors, AI, startups. How do we build that?
So on the manufacturing, I think we see by the evidence that Tamil Nadu is attracting more of it than other states, so it's doing something right. I think the problem is, the fact of the Global Capability Center in services, Tamil Nadu is punching below its weight. I think the BCG study that was done seemed to suggest that Tamil Nadu has a lot of talent, but actually the talent is migrating to other states in these high-end sectors. So they have a nice phrase for this called, the social infrastructure in Tamil Nadu is not as attractive as Mumbai, Pune, Hyderabad, NCR, and Bangalore. And so,
you mean we need more bars in Chennai?
that's one part of it. I think.
No, just say it now. Come on, please.
No, I think I'm going to stick my thing. I think there's no question that alcohol policy in Tamil Nadu is one of the weaknesses in Tamil Nadu here, and I think that.
I think that deserves a round of applause.
No, but it goes beyond alcohol policy. The social, the schooling, the rents. all of those things. So I think if you want to make Tamil Nadu an attractive services proposition, including AI, etc., I think one needs to give more thought to the social infrastructure
I think
component.
it needs more oomph, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, yeah.
I mean, it needs more oomph because actually Tamil Nadu is punching above its weight or maybe at its weight in many, many areas. It just doesn't seem to get that sexy, sales story going across the board, right?
I think, and there maybe to some extent, people think that, oh, it's a manufacturing state and not a services state, and that also takes away from the oomph of attracting talent into the, because remember, see, if you look at the unicorn data, for example, the startup data, which I've looked at over the last 5 years, Tamil Nadu is punched way below its weight in attracting unicorns relative to the other states.
Yeah.
And therefore, the broader thing of what do you do to make this remains on the table. And I think that,
This is going to be the key takeaway from our conversation to all the senior government officials sitting here. They were talking about oomph for no reason. It isn't going to work. Okay, so two last questions to both of you. One is, how do we put climate and sustainability at the center of all of this? Green energy is one way of doing it, but is the state thinking through, I keep asking this of the union budget, that when you write a budget as a country, are you writing a budget that is a sustainability-driven budget, and not ad hoc providing for small bits and pieces over time, right? So is the state looking at it from that point of view?
Look, remember that, so in Tamil Nadu, there's something very peculiar about Tamil Nadu. There's the greater sustainability issue, which I'll come to in a second. But then Tamil Nadu in the last 5-10 years has shown that it's especially disaster prone. We had these 2015
this,
budgets
yes.
and we had the floods this year. So I think the question of sustainability in Tamil Nadu has to focus a lot on how do you manage some of these disasters, which are linked to climate change, for example.
So urban outcomes. Are you talking about urban outcomes, urban infrastructure outcomes?
So just the whole, how do you design resilient infrastructure is a big part of the sustainability equation for Tamil Nadu. And it's going to become a more and more important issue. And I think here, really, I think these floods, and of course the 2015 floods, I think are a wake-up call to the government to think much more seriously, because it's going to happen much more frequently, and therefore a big issue, and I think government will start devoting more attention to that. So that's on this very specific to Tamil Nadu. I think Odisha shares this kind of trait. It's not true anywhere. It's true, of course, all over the world.
I think increasingly in India, we're seeing aberrant weather all the time.
All over the world.
Right?
But Tamil Nadu has had two major.
Definitely.
And then on the broader thing about the green part, there's the renewables component, which Tamil Nadu is doing.
Yeah.
The other thing I think, which is a very slightly controversial thing to say, is that remember that world over, there's a lot of focus on getting the subsidies that we give for carbon consumption, get it down. That's a big part. And Tamil Nadu is a culprit along with the other states, because if it actually subsidizes not just agriculture gets pays zero charges for power, but even rich households are heavily subsidized. So any conception of a sustainable, green, renewable has to have energy pricing. So the resilient infrastructure, the energy pricing, and attracting renewables, these would be the three big components for Tamil Nadu for actually incorporating this in its development strategy.
Not just as a mention, in an annual report. My final question to you, Dr. Rajan, then, is on what has been for so long now such an enduring advantage for Tamil Nadu, which is its people, right? We've spoken about this every 5 minutes all through morning, trained, skilled people of great high value. But I think there's one number that concerns me. I believe that the median age of working people in the state is now at the higher end relative to other states. It continues to be an advantage, but at some point it may become a drag. What does Tamil Nadu do to turn this from a potential drag into a potential solution of sorts?
Right. Before I go there, just on the green, yes, every part of India is going to be increasingly exposed to climate problems. As is true of every South Asian country, as is true of many countries in the tropics. I think what you have to think about it all the time. One of the factors that contributes to resilience is diversification across areas, across industries, across sectors. And I think Tamil Nadu has an advantage there because it's not wholly dependent in one area. Even we saw 25% the distribution of activity within the state. But I think absolutely there has to be much more focus on how do we become much more resilient. Adaptation has to be the name of the game. And of course, we need to focus also on mitigation. But before we put all our eggs in the mitigation basket, we need to adapt to the possible changes that are coming fast down the line. On the issue of people, I think historically the answer to aging populations has been migration, which is be open to migrants, because you will find you can use them in very effective ways. And Tamil Nadu has been doing that for quite some time. So I would say I don't see aging as a problem if Tamil Nadu stays open and finds ways to absorb the migrants that come from the other parts of India, because India is still going to be young for the next 20, 25 years. What is important is that there has to be, again, maybe I sound like a broken record, you have to move to higher value added parts, because that's where your comparative advantage increasingly as a state is going to be, but you get the migrants to do some of the other areas that you are leaving. So India has to operate like a continental economy. The faster moving countries, in this case, the faster moving states, are going to go upstream in terms of activity and allow the slower moving states to fill in the gaps through migration. That will be part of the answer.
So on this question, see, historically, as populations age, there are two ways in which they address this. One, as Raghu rightly said, immigration, within India immigration. Now, remember this, within India immigration is both an opportunity, but also, beyond a certain point, you get the same kinds of forces that you see when migration happens across borders. In parts of India, we have seen a bit of a backlash against, migration from other states. I think that's something that one needs to be aware of. I completely agree with Raghu. It has to be open, but not unaware of some of the long-term political consequences that can happen. The second way historically that countries deal with aging is by increasing female labor force participation. And Tamil Nadu is doing well on that, but it's by no means, it's still, so if female labor force participation is maybe 20, 30% now, another way you can combat aging is to get that up to 70, 80%, because then you get a larger workforce, even for the same amount of population. So immigration, greater labor force participation from women, I think is another way in which, and Tamil Nadu is well placed to do that.
And let me add a third, since Arvind and I are of a certain age. The third way is to employ the elderly. So keep using ex-economic advisors in new jobs.
I would wholeheartedly support that. But I think in one way all of us do it already is, Raghu has not quite reached that age. I'm a grandfather as well. So providing a lot of babysitting facilities for our children is another way of gainfully employing the elderly like Raghu and me here.
Okay, I'm so glad I didn't get counted in that group. I just want to bring it back to Tamil Nadu, give both of you 30 seconds to wrap up in terms of a message. But before that, maybe take one or two questions from the audience. We have limited time, so if there's anyone who does want to put a question to our experts, please put your hand up and keep your question brief, please. There's a gentleman right up front who was really quick, so. Oh, sorry.
Training centers.
Just very quick.
You appoint
questions.
the people, no problem.
Yeah.
But training is most important.
Training.
Training.
All right. Great.
Yeah. Well equipped and training. Then that will take the success.
Okay. All right. Thank you. That's a comment, not a question. Question, please.
So I agree with the notion that, going green is not necessarily, something that many corporations will do on their own, which is why I think part of the answer for going green is regulation. The idea that it's win-win-win all the time, I think is sometimes oversold. And I think that's the point that Ashwath Damodaran is making. I do think we need sensible green policies to emerge from the government. It doesn't have to be onerous. It has to be incentive compatible, but that's something that needs to be thought through in every country, not just in India.
I think the backlash against ESG is also that it's become a way of kind of greenwashing and all of that stuff. So the manipulation by the corporate world of ESG, that's something that we need to prevent. For example, a green project would have happened in any case, but then some firm says, "Oh, we did a green project, give us some extra credit for that." So that kind of manipulation of ESG, which has been happening quite a bit in the last few years, I think that we need to check as well.
So this is question from my side.
What
I am Dr. Sai Babu. Hello, I'm here. I'm right in front of you.
Oh, there, so
I'm
sorry.
here.
Because the gentleman there has a mic as well.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
I was surprised his mouth was not moving, but there was a voice.
So I'm Dr. Sai Babu. I belong to a Madurai-based Tamil family. For the past 4 generations, my aunt sisters were working. If you get a job, then only you will get married. If you are starting a company, if you are running a company, they will never give a female or girl. Such a kind of conservative culture we have been gone through in the past 4 generations. But thanks to the latest policies of the government, very recently, I was also working for 15 years. And I finally decided I need to break the 4-generation culture. I need to come out from the conservatism. I started a small startup. Started with 2 people. Currently, we employ around 1,200 people into environmental sustainability direction. So this is how the Tamil Nadu families are emerging, Tamil Nadu is emerging. The days have gone, the startup is going to Singapore, the startup is going to the Bangalore. No, that's all myth, it's all fantasy. But slowly, the startups, the investments, everything will come towards Tamil Nadu, everything will come towards the skill, everything will come towards the engineering and English, what we have. We don't speak other than 2 languages, English and Tamil. But irrespective of that, we could be able to manage and we could be able to attract the investment all over the world. This is the specialty of Tamil Nadu. This is what the Tamil Nadu is growing. And I am the testimony for that. Thank you for the wonderful discussion. Thank you so much.
Questions,
Hello.
please.
Okay.
Please try and do keep it to questions. You
how
will get
is
a
the-
chance to interact with our experts on the sidelines.
If you could address about the rising labor costs, how is
Sorry,
it going to
could you speak up
impact?
a little louder, sir? Can't hear you very
How
well.
is the rising labor costs? The economy is growing, the labor cost goes up.
Labor
How is
costs.
it going? Yes. How is it going to impact the growth? And number 2, how is this going to be affecting in terms of competition with the other countries? They're also looking to grow and to gain from the growing economy. I'm talking about other countries.
If I understood you correctly, sir, you're saying how will the impact of rising labor costs in India, play out in terms of being able to attract investments from across the world?
Yes, and also
Yeah, okay.
where the labor cost is
I
low,
think this
other places.
speaks to your low cost. Don't put all your eggs in the low cost labor basket,
Well,
right?
it's also the point that the first gentleman made about training. If we have a large unemployed population, but still labor costs are rising, it suggests that the ones who are unemployed don't have the skills to get the jobs that are available, which means that we need to train them up. That's why schemes like Nan Mudalvan start becoming important in bridging the gap.
So I think just
You want to offer a
two
sec-
points on
yeah,
that.
okay.
One is that if labor costs are rising because of growth, that's a good thing, not a bad thing. So you have to be careful what the source of the
Sure.
labor cost growth
Yeah.
is. The second thing is that what has been, I think, so this is a bit of a puzzle that one needs to think about, is that Tamil Nadu is actually one of the richest states in India, right? Yet, why has it been able to attract so much manufacturing, despite the fact that you would think that labor costs are much higher than in other states. So that's a bit of a puzzle for me. I've not completely understood it, but it does seem to suggest that, you know, the other things in Tamil Nadu are good enough that they may compensate for the slightly higher labor costs relative to other states.
Does it also create a repository of skills?
Yeah, so that could be one thing.
It
could be one thing. It could be higher labor costs reflects the fact that, you know, if in effective terms actually labor costs are not as high when you correct for the real ability and the skill of the population.
That they're bringing in. Okay.
Okay,
Yes,
good
please.
afternoon.
Question.
I have a question, madam.
Where
I
are
am
you,
from,
sir?
I'm here.
Oh, there you are.
Yeah,
Yes.
I am actually from Krishnagiri district and migrated to Bangalore for my higher studies. But wherein I did my complete education in Tamil medium government schools and migrated, I have created job opportunities for more than 2,000 people in Krishnagiri district now. Don't you think it's a good advice? Why looking investment only from outsiders? If the government work with the district level achievers, encourage them, make them to invest into their own districts. Like we Tamilians are more sentimentally attached to the language and the districts places. Don't you think it's a good advice from the government to identify the local achievers and support them so that district improves, state improves, country improves?
So we were assuming that or
It's
rather
not
that
happening.
is the basic
It's not
minimum.
happening. It's not happening.
It's not
See,
happening.
It's not happening. See,
Okay,
we are
so-
only looking for
so
the
do you want
achievers
suggestions?
from the
Do you want
outside.
suggestions from our panelists
Yeah,
on
please,
how that could
please
happen
suggest
potentially?
to government and please suggest
Oh,
also.
please suggest to the. So you want to use
government.
them as conveyors of
Actually, see, I have adopted 2 government school. The best talents from the government school has come prior to 90s. After that, the talents are not coming from the government school because they're not getting the enough support and the scope. This is the area, if this improved, large talent pool can come, large development can happen.
Okay, great. I'm sure both of them heard you and will take the message to government. This gentleman has been standing here. Yeah.
So, on a national perspective, do you think signing more bilateral investment treaties will sort of gain investor confidence across the country? Because recently, we paid a Japanese firm around a compensation of 1,500 crores. So, a strategic bilateral investment treaties will sort of gradually increase investment confidence. What are your suggestions for that?
Oh, which one of you wants to take
Yeah,
that?
can I?
Sure,
make-
please
yeah.
do.
So it's a great question. You know that India allowed all its bilateral investment treaties to lapse about 4 or 5 years ago. And so that's been a source of concern, especially for European investors. So I think on balance, the government should consider these if it wants to attract investment. But I want to give an example and actually give a shout out to Vishnu, who's the head of guidance, who made a fantastic point. So I was challenging him on Tamil Nadu and saying, Tamil Nadu, what is your investor climate? Was it General Motor or Ford which left Tamil Nadu? Ford left Tamil Nadu, right? So
Ford
I said,
left India. I mean,
no, it left Tamil Nadu actually.
Okay, fine.
Left Tamil Nadu. So I said, doesn't it show bad investment climate? The point that he made was that actually the process of exit of this foreign investor, we made it very smooth and without any problems. So, in a sense, if you create a climate without the treaty is a good thing, but over and above that, if you create a climate that is not just good for coming in, but also allows smooth exit, because the smoother the exit, the greater the guarantee and assurance that you will come in. So that's a great example of things that states can do, because remember, investment treaties have to be negotiated by the center. They can't be negotiated by the states. So the center has to do these things, but over and above that, states can do these things by way of good exit that actually attracts more investment.
yeah, which is a single window entry and then
all
an
of that, yeah,
easy
yeah, exactly.
single window exit as well.
But all
if
of
you
these
want,
are for
yeah.
entry, but I'm saying
Yeah,
that
that's what I'm saying. An easy single window exit as well.
As
if
well,
possible.
exactly, yeah.
Because it is difficult actually to shut down.
Yeah, because labor problems,
land.
all of these, yeah.
yeah.
And I think the Ford example was a fantastic example of how smooth the exit was.
Okay, great.
I would also add that states need to play a bigger part in the negotiation of these investment treaties. Especially, it would be good if India were part of regional trade agreements, but invariably, we don't focus on what benefits us, only on what hurts us. So, for example, it's always agriculture we need to protect, But, Tamil Nadu has a fantastic presence in milk. Can we open up the milk products in other countries to our exports? Value-added milk products, not just direct milk. So that would be an example of a state pushing the center when we negotiate with RCEP, for example, which I hope we will, that can we push some of our own agricultural products forward as opposed to just saying we got to defend and protect our agriculture against others.
All right. I know there are many more questions. Forgive me, we are out of time, but I'm sure you will get a chance. All right. Can you please keep it brief? What do you think in terms of thinking?
Building a third AI front from India.
Third AI?
Third AI front.
Yeah, that is what. Becoming a third front in this AI race. That is what I mean to ask you. Because there is a lot of race between Microsoft, Google, and big boys over there. And what about building a third front from here? And the second thing is that Mr. Rajan has rightly said, we need to add this higher value chain has to be handled here. And we just need a breakthrough. He said that we need a lot of IIT, NIT, and all these things. And just a breakthrough is required. Say, for example, computer works in zeros and ones. What if we can break it, work it with 4 inputs, 1 output, 1 input and 4 output? If that is going to happen, that can be happened. Like, I'm just waiting for my breakthrough in particle physics where an atomic spectrum is going to happen. Okay, just my question, I'll make it simple now.
Yes, please.
What do you, okay, fine. I'll not go deeper
really
into
sorry.
the question.
Make it a 0-1 question.
I think
Make
you're
it a-
asking,
I'll ask in binary.
can Tamil
What is
Nadu and
your-
India
yeah, that
play
is
a
what.
big role in AI? Is that what you're asking?
Now, can India, as a third front from here,
Yeah, get that. Okay, I get
That's
it.
it.
Tamil Nadu
I just
and
want
India
to
play
know
a big...
their opinion.
Okay, great. Can you offer an answer to that? And both of you, please wrap up in 20 seconds each if you have any other comments to make.
I wouldn't say third front. I would say India needs to have a presence in AI, absolutely. Because it's going to affect every facet of what we do. It is going to improve productivity. For example, in software writing already, productivity improvements of 40%, 50%. So we absolutely need to have a presence. We need to not fall back in that race. Whether it's a third front or not, I'm not so sure. But it certainly is, we need to strengthen our presence in AI.
I'm sure there are many more questions. We're entirely out of time. Maybe have exceeded it as well. Thank you, everyone, for being a fabulous audience, and to both our panelists today for some very incredible insights.